Hello. The Internet of Things is around us everywhere. You probably have some smart devices in your home, and if you don't, I can guarantee your workplace probably does. In this lesson, we're going to start with the basics of what IoT is, how it functions, and the impact it has on our life. Let's begin with a few definitions. Now, I'm using a few different definitions here, but they all overlap a little bit. The IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, the people that make standards for things like protocols, they state that IoT is a worldwide network of interconnected objects, uniquely addressable, based on standard communication protocols. The ITU, the International Technological Union, says that IoT is a global infrastructure for the information society, enabling advanced services by interconnecting physical and virtual things based on existing and evolving interoperable information and communication technologies. And finally, the Institute of Electrical and Electrical Engineers, IEEE, they state that IoT is a network of items, each embedded with sensors, which are connected to the Internet. Now, these aren't contradictory definitions. IoT, as the name suggests, are when you have things, devices, that connect directly to the Internet without necessarily a human having to be involved. Your computer, of course, connects to the Internet, as does your smartphone, but it normally waits for you to do something. You request a web page, you send an email. But devices, like a smart thermostat, may coordinate somewhere on the Internet without you having to do anything. Now, this provides a lot of convenience, but it also provides some security issues. Recent years have seen an explosive growth in IoT devices, and this is in every sector: home, medical, industrial, military, everywhere. In fact, many sources claim that by the end of 2020, the number of connected devices, IoT devices, is expected to be 30 billion. Now, that's a pretty large number, and that should indicate to you just how pervasive IoT is. Now, IoT works basically with a huge network of sensors and smart devices that are communicating, sometimes communicating with each other, sometimes with some central repository. And this allows us to execute advanced analytics and to understand all that data. Normally, data is synchronized with some sort of cloud repository. This is really the next frontier in the digital revolution. First, we had computers, then we had internet, then we had smartphones that we walked around with, and now we have IoT that's drastically changing our entire society. Now, IoT gives us some practical advantages. It allows any object to either be controlled remotely or to collect data remotely, and we can connect that through our existing network infrastructure. So we can directly integrate our physical world into computer-based systems. This can give us improved efficiency, ease of use, things of that nature. For example, I have mostly a smart home in my own home. I could sit here today and alter lights, temperature, whatever, even though I'm in a different state hundreds of miles away. Now, I won't do that for a demonstration because my wife is at home, and I suspect she wouldn't appreciate that. But the point is, I can remotely control my entire home, or I can just get data. I could find out right now what the temperature is upstairs in my house, even though I'm far away. Now, this began, rather interestingly enough, at Carnegie Mellon University. They took a vending machine that vended Coca-Colas, and they changed it. They altered it so that it would report its inventory. So instead of going to the vending machine and discovering, much to your disappointment, that it's out of Coca-Cola, they were notified in advance that it needed more product. Now, that was the beginning of smart or IoT devices. It allows us to monitor devices remotely and to get information, and that was pretty useful. Now, there are forecasts that suggest IoT spending will have an annual growth of 14.4% all the way through 2021 and surpassing the $1 trillion mark in 2020, reaching $1.1 trillion by 2021. Now, just let those numbers sink in for just a moment. This is not just a major part of our lives, it's a significant part of our economy. Now, the McKinsey Global Institute, they estimate that IoT could have an annual impact on our economy of $3.9 trillion worldwide, maybe as much as $11.1 trillion by 2025. And this means IoT in factories, it's smart cities, retail, even inside the human body. We're going to be discussing medical IoT a little later in this lesson, but it is possible to have implantable devices, and there are really good uses for that. IoT is all about enabling communication between devices, and that means our virtual systems as well as our real physical devices, getting everything truly connected so information flows. We concentrate on the state of the devices. Now think about that for a moment. What do we mean by state of the devices? Well, I used the example of thermostats in my home just a moment ago, so the state might be the current temperature. It also might be on or off. It also might be, is it set to heat or cool? And mine also have additional settings like ecologically friendly, so they will heat and cool in a manner that's ecologically sound. These are the state of the devices, and we can get information on those. So a house that's using that IoT paradigm, like mine, would also let you know if a door is open or if it's locked. And by the way, my home does that as well. If a door is left open for an unusual period of time, I'm notified of it. That could mean something's gone wrong, or it could just mean my wife is out in the garden. But I get to know what's happening. Now, there are a lot of different definitions and approaches and different thoughts about what IoT means. And I'm sure some of you are already thinking about dystopian applications that maybe make you a little frightened. That's when we'll talk in later courses about IoT security. But this has become essential for our digital infrastructure. The model that allows you to interact with your devices from anywhere, anytime is just compelling. Imagine a factory, for example, wherein you have robotic devices that restock different supplies, but that a device, a machine, tells the robot that I'm running low on this raw material I need to produce a product, and it's already there and replaced before the machine runs out. This improves efficiency and productivity tremendously. And it's just an extension of the Coca-Cola machine at Carnegie Mellon. We know that something is running out of stock. Well, let's go ahead and automatically replenish it. Now, of course, there needs to be some control, some regulatory policy, and different countries are approaching this, and we'll see standards on this later. We need to think about security and privacy. We need to think about the framework and how complex it might be, and we need to have an understanding of it. And this means understanding how IoT is implemented in different regions. That means countries, states, cities, and across different industries, and in different supply chain scenarios. So we talked a lot about smart devices and smart home. What does it mean to be smart in a device context? Well, we have passive intelligence, where it communicates only when you query it. You have to ask the device to give you information. That would be how my thermostats function. Active, it communicates whenever it's needed. That would be how my doors function. They're going to tell me if a door's open. Aware, it's action based on simple computation. For example, now my home doesn't do this now, but it could be configured so that if a door is open too long, maybe we turn off the heat or air conditioning so that we don't waste energy. That would be useful. And that also leads us to point number 4. Autonomous, can make decisions based on rules. Now, people get uncomfortable when machines are making decisions, and we're not talking about Skynet here taking over the world. We're talking about simple decisions like replenishing a Coke machine, understanding that you have doors and windows open, thus you should turn off the heat or air conditioning. Simple decisions that you would probably make the same decision, but it takes this away from you where you don't have to. Now, before you get too concerned, all IoT devices, at least today, give you the option of overriding its decisions. But I like the idea that there's some automation. I don't have to think about those things. I can think about more interesting things. Smart technology is basically utilizing computer hardware and software to give us information so we can control, monitor, and optimize any sort of device. Now, in the case of smart homes, we're thinking about household appliances and systems, how we can optimize those so they work best. So I'm not wasting energy by cranking up my heater while the front door is left open for 30 minutes. Those sorts of things. Now, a smart home is basically a situation where the home has the various appliances communicating with each other and allowing them to make simple decisions without you needing to be concerned about it. For example, there are smart coffee makers, so if you know you get up at 6 a.m. every morning, you can have the coffee maker go ahead and start and have a pot of coffee ready for you when you walk into the kitchen. Now that's just convenience. The issue I mentioned earlier with doors being opened and regulating your thermostat in conjunction with that, that's convenience, but it also saves me energy and saves me money. So these are the sorts of things we're talking about in a smart home. A power grid, a smart grid, which we'll talk a lot about in later lessons, is all about managing power distribution effectively. If you've lived in any major city, particularly on the far west coast, LA, places like that, brownouts happen from time to time because we're not adequately managing our power needs. Now, I happen to live in Texas, where in the summer it gets quite warm. So you know that in August you need to shunt power differently than you do in March. If the grid itself can understand power fluctuations and power needs and regulate and distribute power more efficiently, that's going to save us money, it's going to save us energy, and it's going to make things more convenient for human beings. Now, one example of that are smart meters. They're digital energy meters that have a chip in them and a scheduler, which can make decisions based on information. For example, if you're at work every Monday through Friday from 8 to 10, maybe you need less energy in your home from 8 to 10. I'm just using it as an example. You probably work more than just those 2 hours, but that would be one example where a smart grid could learn and regulate power for you. Now, the entire smart home brings together a lot of different devices. I have a few here that we want to talk about. The electric washing machine. Now, you may think that's not smart. Well, it's a washing machine. We have it already. Well, today we already have more advanced washing machines. But what I'm talking about here is the original electric washing machine and how convenient it made your life. Now, most of you may not recall anything different than that. My grandmother, for many years, did not have an electric washing machine. She had an old machine that you had to actually push the machine through, push the clothes through, and crank it through different rotors that would squeeze out water and things of that nature. And doing laundry was a horrendous chore. I mean, it was like an all afternoon. Your arms and shoulders are tired when you're done, that sort of thing. Now, contrast that to your standard washing machine today. You put the clothes in, you put in some detergent, set a time, and go about your business. That is an advance. Well, all smart devices are doing is taking the next advance in convenience. Now, Electrolux has made a screen fridge, which can communicate via email or voicemail or video mail, and it lets you know what's in your refrigerator. Now, the concept of this is you're at the grocery store and you cannot recall, are we out of milk or not? Well, peek into your refrigerator and see. I don't know about you, but I frequently forget what I'm supposed to get at the grocery store, and I'm looking forward to adding the smart refrigerator to my smart home. But it also allows the refrigerator itself to be connected to the internet. You could put a shopping list on there. As you took the last of the ice cream, you could write it down on a screen, and it's automatically updating a shopping list. You could also get television or radio or internet right there on the refrigerator. Lots of people put TVs or radios in their kitchen anyway, so integrating it with the refrigerator is a natural step. Many of them also come with a cookbook, and in some cases it's voice activated. You can be in the kitchen and say, refrigerator, what is the recipe for an apple pie? And it will read it off to you while you're cooking. It could also tell you whether or not you have the necessary ingredients. So this is a great convenience. LG's Internet washing machine has all of the informations and communication response to home network products. It will give you new washing cycles. For example, maybe you're washing something you've never washed before, a throw rug. Well, you could download the specific washing instructions for that specific type of item that you want to wash so that you wash it appropriately and don't damage it. The intelligent home is not just about your domestic environment. It's also about ambient intelligence. For example, a bathroom mirror that reflects your image or gives you the news and weather. Now, in my master bath, I have something similar to that. There's actually a TV installed behind the mirror. And if I like, while I'm getting ready in the morning, I can have one section of my mirror project the morning news. So while I'm brushing my teeth, trimming my beard, I can find out what's happening in the world. You can take that to another level and actually integrate the television materials within the mirror. Check your email while you're brushing your teeth if you wish. An audio system that can trigger a song when you hum the tune. So if you're trying to hum some tune, if you get relatively close, it will start playing the song for you, or at least tell you what the song name and artist is. A thermostat that learns, so it knows you. For example, this time of year, it's always difficult for me to keep the thermostat. It's currently March, because during part of the day, I don't want the heater on, but during the middle of the night, I want it on. It'd be nice if my thermostat would just learn that and say, in early March, Chuck would really like you to turn on the thermostat to give him a little heat about 3 in the morning so he doesn't wake up cold. And if he forgets to turn it on, the thermostat will remember. Smart homes usually also include some control center, a centralized device. Now, that can be an app on your tablet or phone. It can be an actual physical device, whatever it may be. And there's lots of things you can include in a smart home. Most people today don't have a totally smart home. They have some portion of this. For example, intelligent lighting. You could have lighting that detects when no one's been in the room for a while and turns itself off. A lot of college campuses and businesses do that. Electrical control systems for all of your other electrical appliances. The entire audio throughout the home, and maybe it even detects, instead of playing through every room, it detects what room people are in, and the music could follow you throughout the house. Speakers with audio-visual and home theater. There are already televisions that advertise if you have TV in more than one room, you can have the movie you're watching follow you. Pause it in this room and pick it up in another room. Video door phones are quite popular. You can see who's at the door, whether you're home or not. Cameras and surveillance systems have been around for some time, allowing you to monitor what occurs around your home. And of course, home alarm systems are quite popular. Smart locks are becoming more and more popular. I really like those because I don't have to check every lock in my house. I just say, hey Google, lock doors, and all my doors are locked. Intelligent sun shading systems. If your house faces towards the sun a period of the day, you could have windows become more opaque during that time of the day so you don't get blinded with sunlight. Exercise and health monitoring equipment along with smart home software. Perhaps your home keeps track, if you want it to, of both your diet through your refrigerator and your exercise through your exercise equipment. And that also gets incorporated with heating, air conditioning, and thermostats. Now, right now, some of you are probably a little taken aback. You're thinking, I don't want my devices to have this much knowledge of me. Well, the good news is, at least currently, all of these technologies, you decide how much is automated and how much is not. You could have very little automated. You could have it all automated. It's up to you. So it's meant to be a convenience if you want it. It's not meant to take over your life. In 1886, the first power grid was installed in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. Now, of course, since then it's expanded greatly. There are power grids everywhere. But we can have improper management, which leads to blackouts, brownouts, and other power issues. This is why there's a push for a smart grid, so we manage power appropriately. Now, this is a rather long piece of text. I won't read it all to you, but it's the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007. It basically says that the United States would like to modernize all of its electrical transmission and distribution system, and this will accomplish a few goals. One being we'll use less energy, and that leads to a second goal. If we're using less energy, we may become less dependent on foreign energy sources. So smart energy use, smart grid, can actually be an element of national security, in addition to being a positive impact on the environment. Now, this is going to require integration of smart appliances. It's going to require chips in the grid itself. It's going to require a lot of overhaul. But ultimately, this isn't just about convenience. This is about better use of resources so we have less impact on the environment, and we have less reliance on foreign energy sources. And that's true for any country. Wherever you're at, you don't want over-reliance on external energy sources. Now, the European Union, they have their own definition for a smart grid. They say A smart grid is an electricity network that can cost efficiently integrate the behavior and actions of all users connected to it, and the generators, the consumers, and those that do both, in order to ensure economically efficient, sustainable power system with low losses, high levels of quality, and security of supply and safety. Now, I won't read the rest of that. You can read it yourself, but that first part really captures the purpose. We want to make things cost efficient, and we want to make things effective and convenient. Now, we have a few parts of a smart grid. Obviously, power generation. We want to make sure power is being generated effectively and efficiently and not wastefully. Sometimes power is stored. We want to make sure it's stored appropriately. Then, of course, transmission and distribution has to be tied in with demand. We need to make sure that we understand when we need the greatest load and that we're facilitating that. Has to be reliable. We need faults detection, if possible, correcting those faults. We need to constantly have information on the state of the grid so we know if there are problems arising, and it has to be efficient. Basically, machines are better at these sorts of things than human operators are. By the time a human operator realizes there's a problem, it may already have spun out of control. If machinery can realize there's a problem likely to occur in the near future due to fluctuating usage, well, then we can head off that problem altogether. Now, here's a case study with the New York State Power Authority. And with most of these dense textual screens, I won't read it all to you. You're capable of reading. I'll just hit the highlights. Now, the New York State Power Authority is the largest state public power organization in the U.S. If you think about that for a moment, New York City alone has a larger population than some states. And it has 16 facilities, including 2 plants powered by Niagara Falls, 1,400 circuit miles of transmission lines, 15 to 20% of the power of New York State daily electrical output comes from the New York State Power Authority. Now, they have been connected to energy-producing machines and analytics software via sensors. That software is running in their smart operation centers and provides operation leaders with predictive alerts. Now, here's the fun part. Once we're collecting all this data, often in clouds, we can then run data analytics, data mining, machine learning algorithms, whatever we need to learn, and then perhaps predict issues before they occur. Now, a simple one that makes sense to anyone is, if we understand there's about to be a heat wave tomorrow, we understand there'll be an increased demand for air conditioning services, possibly an increased use of water. We can begin preparing for that before it happens. Now, that's a kind of trivial example, but it gives you an idea of the sorts of things we can do. Now, NYPA is basically moving towards a complete smart grid. And the most important thing is they believe that once the buildings are fully online, they believe they will save taxpayers $100 million a year. Now, that's pretty significant. That's the sort of economic savings that justifies the upfront spending on IoT. So why do we want the smart grid? Well, we've already touched on some of this, but let's summarize to make sure you understand. We want reliability most of all. We want to make sure we can take care of the workload. We want to make sure that aging equipment doesn't fail. We also do want to take care of our environment. The more efficiently we handle energy, the less we waste. We definitely want energy security. It's always been a concern, particularly since 2001, that some terrorist faction might attack the infrastructure of a target country or a city or state. Well, smart devices, smart grids help us closer monitor these things and make them more secure. We also want to give people more flexibility, more choices, more options so things run the way you want them to run, because what you need for your home might not be what I need. And this gives you that flexibility. Now, smart grids take us naturally into smart cities. You might think, what do we need besides a smart grid? Well, let's talk about traffic to begin with. Wouldn't it be nice to have traffic routed more intelligently? I bet every one of you watching this has been in a traffic jam. Not caused due to some terrible accident, but just clogged and inefficient routing of traffic. and you find out that there's some other route over here that would have been better. Wouldn't it be better if we could detect this and route traffic intelligently? So this requires high-speed real-time communications. It requires sensors that can diagnose and correct. Now, in the case of the smart grid, which is part of the smart city, it requires energy storage, in-home energy controls, and automated energy use. That's smart city. What about smart agriculture? Obviously, agriculture produces the food we consume, and doing that more efficiently would be worthwhile. Smart agriculture is about increasing food production using the Internet of Things. To begin with, something as simple as managing the water to farming, a water management system that helps increase rice production while optimizing water usage has already been done in Malaysia. There's lots of benefits, such as real-time irrigation control, which optimizes your water usage. We're not wasting water, and we've got water when we need it. Now think about this on a smaller scale. I'm certain you've been driving or walking and seen someone who has a sprinkler running, but it's running at an inappropriate time, perhaps while it's raining. Perhaps it's flooding water in the street. So smart use of water would save water, save money, and in the case of agriculture, Malaysia has already shown that it also increased the yield of rice, increased food production. So that's pretty valuable. What about the military use of this? We've talked about smart cities and smart homes and smart agriculture. There's also the Internet of Military Things. The idea is to integrate information into military operations. Now, you probably think of planes and artillery and tanks and soldiers, but information is important. Beginning in the very early days, when we were first able to deploy radios with units so that they could communicate with headquarters, that improved information and therefore improved the operations. In the 20th century, there was the sound surveillance system that was deployed to detect submarines coming close to North America. This is again a place where we have a device which automatically runs sensors and communicates with some centralized location. Now, the SOSUS network was put up long before the term Internet of Things was even around, but it is an example of Internet of Military Things. Now, they have additional ideas to expand upon this. For example, the Connected Soldier Project is a U.S. Army project to develop intelligent wearable gear, biosensors, radio, and data devices, so you know exactly where the soldier is, how he's doing, what his health situation is, and he can get information direct from command. This is related to the concept of Ocean of Things, which is applying IoT to large ocean areas so that a Navy has complete situational awareness. The bottom line is, as much as we think of military in terms of weaponry and soldiers and physical fitness, it's also about information. And not having information can be the complete decider, in a negative way, to any battle. On the other hand, complete information can also change a battle. In 2016, the U.S. Army Research Laboratory created the Internet of Battlefield Things projects. It's all about future goals to provide Internet of Battlefield Things Collaborative Research Alliance work that was established in 2017. It brings together industrial sources, academic sources, and government sources to improve information on the battlefield, which means IoT, integrated not just in equipment such as tanks and vehicles, but actually wearable equipment for the soldiers. Two major goals of this project are communication and learning. The communication is important, seamless, real-time communications from the individual soldier up through every layer of command, but also learning, machine learning to adapt and improve performance, to learn better ways to do everything from transport and supply up to actual operations. Integrating all this allows us to more rapidly adapt to changing situations. Now, this screen gives you a little bit of the IoT architecture, and this might look very similar to the ISO model for networking, and it is similar. We have the application layer, which are the various applications that you interact with. Then we have middleware, which will handle device management, information flow, things of that nature. At some point, that connects to the internet layer, which is your traditional network, whether it be wireless, cellular, hardwired. That is where communication happens. And then we get down to the access gateway layer, which gives us protocol translation, messages, things of that nature. And then at the lowest level, we have edge technology, the actual sensors, the machines, the nodes, things of that nature. Now, I won't read this whole chart to you. You can, of course, see it yourself, but let's look at a few examples. You have energy applications where we might have oil and gas or alternative energies like solar and wind. And we can look at the groups of applications, we can look at the locations where they would be deployed, and we can look at the specific devices. There's healthcare, such as medical implants, monitoring systems, and then healthcare IoT that's utilized in research to help discover new drugs, do better diagnostics, improve laboratories, things of that nature. We can continue with industrial applications, better ways of distribution, which we talked about earlier, but better ways of even moving chemicals around, of handling food and beverages, of manufacturing things. Retail, better distribution and control of the supply chain. Imagine a store that sells your favorite cereal and is aware, automatically, the devices are aware that we've dropped below a certain threshold of that particular cereal, so let's go ahead and reorder it, restock the shelves, and you never walk in and find your shelves are empty. And that's really interesting right now because this is being recorded during a lot of concern over the COVID virus. And there have been shelves that have been emptied of bottled water and of paper products and canned foods and things of that nature. A smart retail system would have detected the increased concern about the virus, would have predicted an increased need for these particular items, would have ordered and had excess stock on hand specifically to handle it, and you wouldn't have found an empty shelf. So that's one of the very powerful things that smart devices can do for us. Security, emergency services, getting police and fire where they need to be appropriately. For example, and some cities have already done this, integrating police, ambulance, and fire with smart traffic control so that ambulance that's coming to pick you up understands there's a traffic jam ahead and is automatically rerouted to a more efficient route. That can save lives. And of course, integrating our internet so you don't have outages. Lots of technologies and protocols, and in a later lesson, we're going to deep dive into these, but things like Bluetooth Low Energy are popular. Light fidelity, near-field communications, radio frequency ID, Wi-Fi, Z-Wave, Zigbee. All of these are some of the communications used. Those are short range. We also have medium range, such as LTE. We have long range, such as low raw WAN, which we'll be talking a lot about later, and cellular. We have wired, such as Ethernet, which you're already familiar with. Then we have specific IoT operating systems, and we'll be talking a lot about these like Zephyr, Contiki, Riot OS, and many others. Lots of models to use, and each of these can be used independently or in conjunction. Do we have a device-to-device model, where one device talks to another, such as one smart device communicating with another? Device to cloud, where the devices are communicating with the cloud? Device to some gateway, such as an application service provider? Or back-end data sharing? Now, that last one is often used when you're going to perform data analytics, data mining, machine learning, things of that nature. Now, in most cases, we have a combination of these. The devices are communicating with each other, and they're also uploading data to the cloud, and they're also communicating with the gateway, and they may also have a back-end data sharing model integrated. So it's not a one or the other. You can integrate all of these models together. Now, we briefly touched on industrial IoT. Let's expand upon that just a bit. You have end devices, whatever they may be. Now, in a manufacturing setting, these could be devices that produce whatever it is, widgets, plastic cans, whatever they're producing. We have sensors that see how production is going. We have objects that we're producing. And a big thing is RFID tags so that we can track where devices are at in our factory or industrial environment. We know where the raw materials are that we need. We know where the finished products are that we need to ship. And of course, actuators that cause certain devices to turn on at certain times. You don't want a device that makes, let's say, plastic bottle caps to be running when it's out of plastic material to use. So an actuator would respond and say, we're running low on raw materials, let's shut down until we've replenished those raw materials. Now, in a complete smart industrial environment, you'd likely never reach that point because you know that you're running low on raw materials. Raw materials would be requisitioned, automatically deployed, and added to the machinery so you wouldn't run out. But if you did start to run out, it would automatically shut down so you don't burn out equipment. Now, one part of any industrial setting is SCADA, supervisory control and data acquisition. Some sources call it site control and data acquisition, but the first definition is more common. This is used in power systems, water treatment, air conditioning, manufacturing, wherever. It's also sometimes called industrial control systems. Now, this has been around for a little bit longer than the IoT term has been popular. It's really popular in certain settings, particularly in nuclear power, to have devices that you can control remotely. For obvious reasons, you probably don't want to walk inside an active reactor to be working with some piece of equipment or to change some setting on it. That probably wouldn't be a good move for you. Now, there are lots of components in SCADA. You have remote terminal units. Now, these will be the part that connects to the sensors to send and receive data. The remote terminal units usually have some sort of embedded controller. There are programmable logical controllers that may be embedded anywhere, including in the remote terminal units. Some sort of telemetry system which will connect the programmable logical controllers and the RTUs with some control center so we can communicate and get all that data back. There's usually a data acquisition server which brings together all the information that we get from telemetry from the PLCs and RTUs. There's some interface that humans work with. It could be a GUI or command line interface, but allows you to interact, to request data, to make changes, things of that nature. Equally important is the historian, which accumulates timestamp data as what's happened in the past. Any sensor alerts, any changes to configuration, that sort of thing is kept. This allows us to troubleshoot problems. It also allows us to apply machine learning algorithms to improve our approach, all of those things. And of course, the supervisory computer system is what the human is using through their human-machine interface if they want to change things. You can have intelligent electronic devices, which has the unfortunate acronym of IED, which has other less pleasant meanings as well. These are microprocessor controllers that power the systems and allow them to make some intelligent decisions. You don't want them to do everything automatically. But consider the nuclear reactor setting. If you're approaching supercriticality, we need to start removing fuel, introducing control rods, things of that nature, even without waiting for a human. If we don't, we're going to have a nuclear accident. Now, there are levels to SCADA. Level 0 are those the field devices, the sensors and control elements, like a valve, something as simple as turning a valve on and off. Level 1 has the industrialized input and output modules. These are processors that are distributed that take information and coordinate it. Level 2 are the supervisor computers, where data is collated. You might have things like the historian at this level. Level 3 is production control level. So we control the level of power production, we control production in manufacturing, whatever we need to do. And level 4 is production scheduling. Level 2 through 4, where humans interact, level 1 and 2 normally don't have direct human interaction unless there's a problem that an electrical engineer has to go correct. There are standards. Now, standards sometimes seem dry and boring, but I think in any context you need to be at least familiar with standards, because standards mean you don't have to think of everything yourself. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can look at what has already been established, what has already been done, and work from there. So, in IST, the United States National Institute of Standards has Special Publication 800-82, which is the Guide to Industrial Control System Security. Now, this is a huge standard. it would take hours just to read it to you. That's not our goal here. Our goal is to make sure you're familiar with it and you at least consult it. And what I find really interesting is it begins by examining threats. So it thinks about security from the very beginning, which is important. Distributed control systems are related to SCADA, but a little bit different. They're not necessarily concerned with information monitoring. They're concerned with controlling some sort of production device. You might think of a distributed control system as a special case of a SCADA for manufacturing. Now, we mentioned the smart city before. Let's come back to that and think about it in more detail. Obviously, we mentioned power, and I briefly talked about traffic control. We briefly touched on emergency services. But think about other things. Waste collection. New York City has frequently had problems with inefficient waste collection, and you wind up with trash piling up. That's not in anyone's best interest. Every part of urban life could be better managed with a smart city. What about repair of roads? Is that being scheduled based on the traffic on the road, based on needs? And if we currently need repair on a road, are we intelligently monitoring traffic on a different route so people don't hit a pothole? Simple things like that can make everyone's life much better. Because on a day-to-day basis, yes, we all think about the big problems, virus epidemics, war, peace, hunger, all those things. But in your day-to-day life, things like traffic, a pothole in the road, have real impact. So controlling those can make things so much more efficient and, frankly, so much more pleasant. You need a framework for a smart city that starts with extensive internet network connection. If you don't have robust connectivity, you're not going to have a smart city. Now think about this. I don't just mean having connected neighborhoods. If you start going to a smart city, you're going to substantially increase the use of bandwidth across that network infrastructure. Are you prepared for that? Before I began moving my home to a smart home, I increased the bandwidth capability because I knew that all these smart devices were going to consume bandwidth. It has to be intelligent. So we have some level of machine learning to optimize processes, to optimize traffic and waste collection is one example. It has to be a hybrid. We're combining the internet world with the physical world. So we get virtual and physical become interconnected. And information is the key to everything. I cannot regulate traffic in a smart city unless I have information. Not just information on current traffic patterns, but information on historical traffic patterns, on issues that are occurring. Something as simple as if there is a presidential visit to a city, the security needs of that radically change traffic patterns that day. So a smart city would have to be aware that that's occurring, say, next Thursday, and to route traffic appropriately. So information is the lifeblood of anything smart. Smart city, smart factory, smart home. It all depends on the flow of information. Now let's talk about something very, very interesting that's a little newer than these other items. Health IoT. Users and smart devices, sensors that might be used. Now already you might have some of this. You might have one of those watches that takes your blood pressure or pulse or monitors how many steps you've walked that day. But it can go far beyond that. Embedded healthcare applications. This should, and is expected to, greatly transform healthcare by improving clinician and patient relationship. Monitor patients remotely. Now, if you're young and healthy, that might not matter to you, but imagine you have a heart condition. Perhaps you have a pacemaker. Let's not wait until you're having a heart attack to notify healthcare officials. What if your heartbeat regulation throughout the day was coordinated with your physician throughout the day? And they could see things are getting a little odd. Maybe you should come in for a checkup. Let's not wait until you're experiencing chest pain. You could run diagnosis in real time. You could be notified of any sudden and abnormal events and act immediately. People that have severe health problems or are getting quite a bit older can stay in their homes and be independent longer if there's some level of monitoring. The University of Nevada at Las Vegas Engineering School set up a smart home just for this purpose, and it was built to illustrate what could be done. So if someone's walking through the house, their heart rate and blood pressure is being monitored in real time, and should they suddenly have a spike in either, or they suddenly become immobilized with no good reason, then authorities are notified. Now, that immobilized issue, no, it's not going to call an ambulance if you take a nap. But if you suddenly are in the kitchen and are suddenly prone, that's not normal. If you walk to your couch and lay down, that is normal. These sorts of things can save lives. This is sometimes called the Internet of Medical Things. Now, these can be things that are worn or implanted in the patient. This allows the doctor to understand things. The most widely known example is the implantable insulin pump. It lets the physician know your blood sugar levels throughout the day. Now, just to give you a little more explanation, some people's diabetes is severe enough that they have to have insulin shots every morning. Some people's diabetes is more severe than that. They walk around with an insulin pump in a bag on their side that's actually injected into them, so at any given moment during the day, they can get an injection of insulin. Well, it'd be very good if your physician was aware of any fluctuations in your insulin levels in real time. Now, that's one example. We used pacemakers earlier. A leading hospital in Germany is working with 37 different organizations on a prototype they call Digital and Analog Communications for an Aging Population. Basically, every year, approximately 17 million people around the globe die of some cardiovascular disease. Many of these could survive if their patients were aware of critical changes. If you wait until you grab your chest and fall to the ground, it may or may not be possible to save you. But if your physician is aware that your blood pressure has been gradually increasing, that your heart flow has been gradually decreasing, then we can take steps in advance. Healthcare IoT is of particular interest to anyone with a disability or that's getting significantly older, say those over 70 years old. Monitoring can summon aid in the event of a problem. Now, in times past, we had the little health monitor people wore, and they could click a button in the case of an emergency. That alone saved lives. A voice-activated home. You've fallen and you can't get up, which used to be on a classic commercial. But what if you could simply shout out, "Hey, I need an ambulance. Hey, help me." How many lives would be saved from that? Remote patient monitoring, particularly with those with severe chronic disabilities and health issues. It should explicitly incorporate security and privacy. Now, we'll be talking about that in a later course, but security and privacy is obviously even more important in medical IoT than it would be in just your thermostat. I don't care if you happen to know what ambient temperature I keep in my living room. I might care if you're privy to all my medical data. Wearable devices embedded in watches, rings, jewelry, patches to get body parameters, things like respiratory rate, skin data, all kinds of things. There are a lot of devices out there now. Cardiocore, motive, implantable cardio defibrillators. There are even researchers working on smart tattoos. Basically, it's a flexible, stretchable sensor that looks like a temporary tattoo put on the skin that can monitor things like heart rate, body temperature, pulse, things like that. And because it's a temporary sensor, it can be pulled off. It's not actually implanted in the body. That's probably more comfortable for most people than actually sticking something in their body. Proteus is an ingestible chip. It controls taking drugs at particular times and tracks the effects. There's a patch on you that gets the chip data and transmits it to a tablet. Now that's pretty innovative. PillCam, a micro camera, which does basically what a colonoscopy would do. You swallow a pill, it goes through your system and takes pictures. Now, if you're 40 years old or older and have ever had a colonoscopy, you're very much looking forward to the PillCam becoming the more prevalent way to do that as opposed to the traditional way. If you don't know how it's done, I'll leave you to look that up on the internet. Miniaturized units can be implanted under the skin. Drug release over long periods of times. If you have a patient that's taking multiple medications, some of which are needed to stay alive, or maybe they're a little forgetful, they don't remember their medications. having an implantable, just under the skin device that releases the medication as needed can be a lifesaver. In some cases, it's been working up to 5 years to control heart disorders. There are also devices that can do early detection of tumors. If you have someone with a high risk of cancer, they might be interested in this. Viruses, infections, the current coronavirus scare, there are devices that can help with this. And in medicine, there's a cardinal rule. The earlier something is detected, the better your outcome. If you detect cancer in very early stages, chances are you're going to survive and be perfectly fine. If you detect it later, the later you detect it, the lower your odds of survival. The same thing's true of heart disease, diabetes, and a number of other things, including viruses, Ebola even. If detected earlier, your prognosis is much better. So these are very important. Now, all of these different things, medical IoT, industrial IoT, military IoT, require some sort of platform. An IoT platform is some sort of software suite that gives you all the functions required by that IoT system. Provisioning and management of endpoints, converting from one protocol to another, maybe this device is using Zigbee and that device is using Z-Wave. Application development, so you have apps that a user can interact with and understand. Places to bring in data and manage data. Process events. Analytics is important. Visualization is very important. There's a reason people like graphs. Just seeing a stream of data doesn't make much sense, but good visual production of data has a lot more meaning. Of course, cybersecurity is critical. Network communications, workflow management, integration, all of these things are important, and they're all part of IoT platforms. They're often implemented as cloud services, such as AWS IoT, Microsoft Azure IoT, GE Predix, Intel IoT, and many others. These let organizations deliver IoT rapidly and at a reduced cost. In other words, you don't have to build it all. You can use one of these IoT cloud solutions to give you the most of the infrastructure you need. So we have your things, any sort of device, medical, industrial, whatever, communicating with the IoT edge, which communicates with the IoT core, often in a cloud, which also communicates with user applications so that you can interact in whatever's appropriate for that device. What's needed to manage a nuclear reactor would be different than what's needed to manage heart health. XLively is one IoT platform. It's produced by Google. It was first named Patube. Well, it's actually pronounced Patch Bay, but spelled Patube, and was later acquired by LogMeIn and renamed, and then Google purchased it and renamed it again. It's a way to integrate systems. Now, the pronunciation is Xively. These people love to spell things one way and pronounce them another, so get accustomed to it. We mentioned AWS before, Amazon's cloud platform for IoT. It's designed for industrial, commercial, or home consumer applications, and it integrates AI along with security measures. So it helps you with the security part, and it also has the machine learning built in, and it supports Amazon's free real-time operating system, which we'll be discussing in a later lesson. GE Predix, which we mentioned before, is specifically for industrial applications. It uses cloud to handle the data integration and processing, and that's the Predict private cloud. They very much tout their security and regulatory compliance. It also integrates machine learning, which is very important. The Google Cloud IoT, which is separate from what we mentioned previously, it has a wide range of tools, including data analytics, lists smart buildings and cities as applications of their platform. So this is very popular in the office building space. Microsoft Azure IoT. Microsoft has been really pushing Azure Cloud for quite some time, so it's no surprise that they offer IoT through Azure. They offer both Linux and Windows virtual machines within their cloud solutions, and a strong emphasis on creating IoT applications and solutions. They also support edge computing, which is when you use edge devices to actually process the data. So some basics. Sensors and transducers convert some kind of energy to the other. So in the case of IoT, a sensor takes some physical activity to an electrical pulse. It takes the temperature in my bedroom and converts that to data. The actuator is the reverse of the sensor. It takes that electrical impulse and converts it to energy. So I decide to increase the temperature in my bedroom by 1 degree. The actuator takes that signal and makes the physical activity happen. And we use here the simple detector of heat. It sends the signal to a microprocessor, and in some cases could send it to a sprinkler if the heat is high enough to indicate a fire. Now we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the thing, the hardware and software. Now, firmware is basically software that's written to a hardware device. It's basically embedded into some chip. It contains low-level programming code that enables software to access the various hardware functions. Now, devices that run this firmware are usually called embedded systems, and they have limited resources, limited storage, limited memory. Things like smartphones, traffic lights, connected vehicles usually have some embedded chips in them. So, embedded technology and the firmware that runs on those devices is already integrated into our daily lives. It's part of the critical infrastructure. It's in bank ATMs. It's in your car. Now, firmware is comprised of a bootloader, which loads everything up after you boot, an operating system kernel, a file system, and the other resources. There are different types of firmware, often built on embedded Linux. There are some built on embedded Windows. That's far less common. Windows IoT Core, and something we'll see a lot in a later lesson, is the real-time operating system. You're going to see that in Lesson 3. Now, sensor networks consist of nodes. These nodes may have different capabilities, but the idea is to gather information. That's what a sensor does. Perhaps detecting motion, detecting temperature, any sort of thing they might detect. They can usually be used in either an ad hoc network or in a pre-configured network. An ad hoc network allows sensors to join and leave, and they may leave due to failure. They may join due to increased need. Normally with IoT, we want an ad hoc network. We want the devices to come and go as needed. Nodes are usually divided into a few different categories. Now, sensor nodes, the ones out there detecting things, usually need to use low power. We don't want them to be energy consumers. They have a sensing device, some memory, a processor, some communication, such as a radio, and they're very constrained in resources. Now, sync nodes are usually more powerful, have more resources, and they're usually used for more robust sensors. Gateways are even more powerful. They're connected to the core network, and they could have all kinds of storage. They could be able to discover devices. They could be able to manage functions, whatever you need them to do. But sensor nodes, sync nodes, and gateways are the 3 primary types of nodes. Now, what sorts of things do you need IoT devices to do? Well, you could probably start enumerating hundreds of different activities, but they really come down to a few different categories. Event detection, detecting some event. If it's healthcare IoT, detecting that my heart rate or blood pressure changed. If it's smart home, detecting that temperature changed. Periodically taking measurements and reporting that data. That's something they all want to do. I would like my home thermostat to be able to tell me what the temperature was at any point in the past. I'd like to know at 2:45 a.m. yesterday what was the temperature. For healthcare IoT, what has my heart rate and blood pressure been throughout the past week, and what is the mean, median, mode, standard deviation, all those kinds of things. And that leads to pattern detection. Pattern detection can be as simple as, well, the statistics I just mentioned. Mean and standard deviation for my heart rate would give you some information. Or it can be much more advanced, such as machine learning, detecting that my heart rate goes up every afternoon at 5:30 might indicate that traffic causes my heart rate to go up. Tracking. Now, if the source is mobile, then we need to send updates that also tell you the location. If you detect that my heart rate goes up every time I'm moving in my car, well, then it's probably traffic that's causing me the heart rate issue, and maybe not a fundamental health issue, just traffic stress. On the other hand, if you discover that my heart rate fluctuates when I'm sitting calmly in my living room, that's probably more concerning to a physician. What's the future? What's coming? We've talked about what's happening, but what's coming? It's growing so fast that, frankly, predicting more than a few years in the future is very difficult. Already we have things today that were not predicted 5 or 10 years ago. We do expect extensive growth to continue. We do expect integration with clouds such as AWS and Azure, which is already happening. We expect better security framework. We hope for better security framework. Convergence of IoT and artificial intelligence is really important. A Gartner study predicts that more than 80% of enterprise IoT will have some level of AI by 2019, which was last year. They expect that getting support for IoT at some levels is going to become pervasive throughout IoT. IoT and blockchain. Blockchain's already been used, probably most famously with things like Bitcoin, but it's already being used in insurance policies to verify documents. Well, since we're concerned about security in IoT, blockchain might help preserve trust. So we know that the command to change the temperature in your bedroom came from you, a trusted source, and not from some external attacker. Better security solutions, secure APIs, better network security, better encryption, authentication. These all have to come as IoT becomes more fundamentally integrated in our society. It must be more secure, and that goes hand in hand with privacy. Big issue happened just a short while ago with attackers being able to compromise certain in-home security cameras and use those to monitor you rather than secure you. Well, that's not acceptable. We can't allow these devices that are giving us so much convenience, perhaps even saving lives, certainly saving money and energy. We can't allow them to become platforms for attacks, and that's already happening. So better security and better privacy are absolutely critical.